When the entire world casts you out, who do you trust? What if the only person to offer you a hand is a man running from ghosts more terrifying than your own? Welcome back to the channel. We all love a story of redemption, where courage is found in the most desperate of times. And today's story is a powerful reminder of just that. And if you believe that everyone deserves a second chance, no matter their past, make sure you're subscribed, because this journey will truly move you. Clara Donovan stood outside the mercantile, her daughter's icy hand clutched tight in hers. She stared at the closed sign hanging crookedly in the window, a sign that was a lie. She could see Mrs. Albright moving inside, deliberately ignoring the two figures freezing on the porch. The storekeeper's wife saw them, her face hardening, and she turned her back, vanishing into the shadows of pickle barrels and bolt goods. 5 coins rested in Clara's palm, exact change for a week's supply of cornmeal. Lily shivered beside her. At 5 years old, she still believed her mother could fix the biting cold and the gnawing hunger. But Clara couldn't fix the town's judgment. She knocked anyway, her knuckles stinging. Once, twice. The door cracked open, held by a heavy brass chain. "We don't serve your kind, Clara." Mrs. Albright's words were as sharp and cold as the Montana wind. "Pastor's orders. You understand." Lily looked up, her small face clouded with a confusion that cut Clara deeper than the hatred. "Mama." Clara had no answer that wouldn't shatter her daughter's innocence. She turned, walking down the muddy main street with her head high and her hope collapsing. The town's women pulled their children indoors as they passed. One man spat tobacco juice near her feet, the brown stain just missing her hem. This was Aspen Falls, Montana Territory, 1884, a place that preached forgiveness but practiced exclusion, especially for unwed mothers. Lily, distracted by the cold, stumbled in a frozen rut. Her small cry of pain echoed in the hostile air. No one moved to help. Clara bent to lift her, the freezing mud soaking through her worn coat, when a calloused, gloved hand appeared first. "Easy now, little one." The voice belonged to a man Clara had never seen. A weathered face trailed dust-caked on his long coat, and eyes that had seen too much. He helped Lily stand, then tipped his hat to Clara, expecting nothing. "Name's Luke Harrison, ma'am. My camp's just outside town. Got hot coffee if the child needs warming." Clara's instinct screamed danger. Every promise from strange man had led to ruin. But Lily's lips were turning blue, and the entire town had just declared them ghosts. "Just warmth," Clara said quietly, her voice hoarse. "Nothing more." Luke nodded once, a flicker of understanding in his guarded eyes. He understood everything she hadn't said. Nothing more. They followed him beyond the town limits, 3 small figures against an endless, oppressive gray sky. Behind them, the church bell tolled, sounding like a judgment. Ahead, a small fire flickered, the only warmth for miles. Luke's camp was Spartan, a dying fire, a worn bedroll, saddlebags that had seen 1,000 trails. He poured coffee from a battered tin pot into a tin cup, asking no questions. That silence felt more generous than any charity she'd ever received. Lily crouched by the flames, extending her pale hands. Clara stood apart, rigid, unable to fully accept kindness she couldn't repay. "Hardtack, not fancy," Luke said, offering a piece. "But it's filling." Lily ate hungrily. Clara picked at hers, watching the stranger who helped without demands, a man who seemed as much of an outcast as she was. Through careful, hesitant conversation, her story emerged in fragments. The traveling surveyor who'd promised marriage and disappeared south. The town that had tolerated her until the new pastor's fiery sermons on morality turned tolerance into open exile. 3 days, she admitted, staring into the flames, the words tearing from her. 3 days until my landlord evicts us. "There's the old Morrison cabin," Luke said, his gaze distant. 5 miles north, up in the high valley. "Empty 2 winters now, since the family passed from diphtheria." He kicked at a log. "Good bones if you can stand the isolation." Hope flickered in Clara's chest, so painful she almost crushed it. "We can't afford land. It's unclaimed," he said. "Squatters' rights." Maybe. He paused, rubbing his jaw. I knew the Morrison boy. Owed him a debt. From the war. Lily, warming now, looked at Luke with the pure, unwavering trust of a child. Are you staying here? A shadow crossed Luke's face. Old pain quickly hidden. No, little one. I'm always moving. But the way he said it sounded like a curse, not a choice. Clara made a decision that felt like stepping off a cliff in the dark. If you helped us reach the cabin, winterize it, I could cook proper meals. I can mend clothes. I won't take charity, Mr. Harrison, but I can work. Luke studied her for a long moment. He saw pride that wouldn't bend, only break. A week's work, he said, his voice rough. Fair trade. Then I ride on. They shook hands, sealing the pact. Lily beamed, not understanding the fragility of adult promises. The first heavy snowflakes of the coming storm began to fall. Luke kicked dirt over the fire, his movements efficient, revealing a man used to leaving. But as he gathered his supplies, Clara noticed him touch a locket at his throat, a brief, unconscious gesture, heavy with memory. He caught her looking and turned away. Storm's coming in, he said gruffly. We should move. The trail to the Morrison cabin wound through a dense pine forest, quickly turning white. Luke led his horse, now laden with their few belongings and supplies he'd retrieved from a hidden cache. Lily perched atop the saddle, bundled in his spare coat. Clara walked beside him, matching his long, steady pace without complaint, despite the cold biting through her thin boots. Lily, energized by the adventure, filled the silence with a stream of questions about squirrels, trees, and why snow was white. Luke answered each one patiently. His voice was gentler than Clara expected from a man with hands so scarred by hard living. You're good with children, she said quietly, during a lull. Was, he replied. One word, carrying years of loss. They made camp at dusk, sheltering under a rocky overhang. Around the small fire, the walls they had both built began to come down. Luke spoke haltingly, the words torn from him, about a wife and infant son taken by diphtheria 5 years prior. I was 3 towns over, he said, staring into the flames, his voice cracking. Chasing fool's gold, gambling away our savings. I came home, to graves, an empty house. He closed his eyes. Haven't stayed anywhere since. Staying means failing the people who trust you. Clara understood that kind of running. I stayed, she whispered. I tried to belong. They punished me for loving the wrong man. They took everything but my name. Then they took that, too. Now I'm nobody's daughter, nobody's wife. Just that woman. Your daughter calls you Mama, Luke said softly. That's a name that matters. Clara's throat tightened. Lily slept between them, small and trusting, a barrier and a bridge all at once. They reached the cabin at full dark, a shadow against shadows. The roof sagged, but the log walls were solid. Inside, it smelled of abandonment and mice, but the fireplace still drew when Luke lit the kindling. He surveyed the work needed. New shingles, window repairs, chimney cleaning. It was more than a week's work. Much more. Clara saw the calculation in his eyes, the pull of the open trail. She released him from his obligation. You've done enough, Mr. Harrison. We can manage from here. We're grateful. But Lily, exploring with a stick, called out from the corner, Luke, which room is yours? The question hung in the cold, dusty air. Luke looked at his saddlebags, still slung over his shoulder. Then he looked at the crude wooden peg protruding from the wall. He made a choice, one that felt like stopping a 5-year run. He hung the bags on the peg. He didn't say he was staying. He just stayed. 3 weeks passed like water, finding new channels, slowly reshaping the landscape until what became what is. Luke repaired the roof at dawn, the sound of his hammer echoing across the empty, silent valley. Clara hung laundry between 2 pines, the clothes snapping in a wind that smelled less of winter each day. Lily chased the 3 scrawny chickens Luke had somehow acquired, her laughter filling spaces that had been silent for too long. They built routines that felt like family, though no one dared use the word. Luke taught Lily to whittle, his large, rough hands guiding her small ones, producing a small fleet of misshapen animals. Clara cooked actual meals, rabbit stew, biscuits, things that required staying in one place long enough to let the dough rise. Small intimacies accumulated. Clara mending Luke's shirt, unconsciously embroidering his initials, L.H., on the cuff. Luke building a small, sturdy rocking chair for the porch without being asked. But reality waited beyond their small sanctuary. Luke rode to Aspen Falls for supplies and returned with half what they needed, his jaw tight. Men had sneered. Women had whispered. The sheriff, a decent but weak man, had pulled him aside. Blackwood's asking questions about that Morrison land. The sheriff had warned, not meeting his eyes. And your arrangement with her. Association damages reputations. Harrison. Luke's hand had tightened on his reins. Old violence stirred beneath his careful control. Good thing I don't have one to lose. He told Clara none of this when he returned, but she read the refusal in the gaps between what he'd brought. That evening, she confronted him on the porch while Lily played inside. You're risking everything for us. Your livelihood, Maybe I'm doing it for me. Luke interrupted, his voice low. Maybe I'm tired of running from everything that might matter. It was the first real admission, the first crack in his armor. That night, a late winter blizzard trapped them inside for 3 days. The forced proximity accelerated what was already inevitable. They talked until Lily fell asleep between them on her pallet, then kept talking in whispers, sharing stories that had no place in daylight. On the third day, Lily woke them at dawn with a question that stopped their breath. She was standing over them, looking from one to the other. Are we a family now? Luke looked at Clara. Clara looked at Lily. Neither answered directly, but their shared silence was an answer. Outside, the storm passed. Inside, something unnamed had arrived. April arrived with the song of robins. Clara woke before dawn one morning and found Luke already outside, kneeling in the dirt, planting seeds in careful rows. He had cleared a patch for a garden. He was planning beyond tomorrow. Days acquired a rhythm. Luke repaired Lily's broken doll with unexpected tenderness, whittling a new arm and sewing it on with horsehair thread. Lily clutched it like a treasure. Clara watched him, seeing the father he would have been, and her heart ached for all three of them. But the past remained. Then Lily, playing near Luke's saddlebags, found the locket. She opened it innocently, bringing it to Clara. Who's this pretty lady? Inside, a woman's portrait and a lock of baby hair. Clara's heart sank, realizing how little she truly knew this man she was falling for. Luke appeared in the doorway, saw the locket in her hand, and his face drained of color. He took it, not roughly, but desperately, and walked out without a word. Clara found him by the creek, his shoulders shaking. She approached slowly, saying nothing. Sometimes silence is the only honest response. I failed them, Luke finally said, his voice breaking. I wasn't there when they needed me. If I just been there. The grief poured out. 5 years of self-punishment and crushing loneliness. Clara held him while he wept. Lily appeared, wrapping her small arms around both adults, sensing the shape of their shared pain. In that broken moment, something healed. They want you happy, Luke, she whispered later, gently returning the locket. Staying sad doesn't honor them. I don't know how to be happy anymore. You're learning, she said. We all are. But their fragile peace was about to be shattered. Luke rode into Aspen Falls the next morning, unaware he was riding into an ambush. The town council waited at the mercantile, Pastor Davies, Rancher Blackwood, and the merchants who owed him. They surrounded him. Blackwood played his hand without subtlety. That Morrison land's mine by rights. Old debt. Legal claim. You got 7 days to vacate. Harrison. Luke's hand twitched toward his hip. That's a lie. Prove it. Blackwood smiled, a predator's smile. The railroad's coming through. That land's worth real money now. You think you can squat with your whore and her bastard and nobody'd notice? Blood roared in Luke's ears. But before he could move, Pastor Davies stepped forward with the other, deadlier threat. We're concerned about the child's welfare, Mr. Harrison. An unwed woman and an unmarried man, living in sin. That's grounds for removal to a proper Christian home. Clara's worst nightmare. Weaponized. Luke rode back to the cabin, shaking with a cold rage and a deeper fear. He told Clara everything. desperation making his words clumsy and wrong. "Marry me," he blurted. "If we're married, they can't call him proper. I'll give you my name. Make you safe." Clara's face went cold, as if he'd struck her. "I won't be Charity, Luke. I will not trap you with obligation." "That's not, I've been someone's duty before." She cut him off, the old wound raw and bleeding. "The man who left said he'd stay out of duty. It's worse than being abandoned. Being someone's burden they resent." "I'm not him," he yelled. "Then why are you proposing? Love or fear?" They had never fought before. The words cut deeper than either of them intended. Luke stormed to the barn. Clara wept in the cabin. Lily hid under the table, their small world collapsing. An hour later, the sheriff arrived with the papers. 7 days to vacate. Violence implied if they resisted. Clara read the eviction notice with trembling hands. Lily emerged from hiding. "Mama, where will we go?" Clara looked at their small life. The curtains she'd sewn, Lily's drawings, the rocking chair, the garden, and began to pack. Outside in the barn, Luke saddled his horse, considering riding to town and ending this the old way. With fists. With violence. With the man he'd been trying not to be. The locket swung on its chain as he gripped the saddle horn. He found himself in the saloon that night, an untouched whiskey glass before him. His knuckles were white around the glass, every muscle coiled. The bartender, an old acquaintance, watched him. "You planning to drink that or break it, Harrison?" The bartender finally asked. "Haven't decided. Heard about your situation. Blackwood's a bastard, but he's got the law bought." Then maybe I remind him what law doesn't cover. Luke's voice was flat, dangerous. The bartender leaned close. "Is that who you want the little girl to remember? Another violent drifter? Or the man who stayed and fought right?" The words hit Luke harder than a fist. He saw his reflection in the mirror behind the bar. The hard eyes, the tight jaw. The man who'd lost everything by being exactly this. He stood, left the whiskey untouched, and walked out into the cold starlight. Meanwhile, at the cabin, Clara packed. Each item felt like surrender. The embroidered shirt, the tin cups, Lily's whittled animals. Lily sat on the floor, clutching her repaired doll. Then she stood, walked outside to the small garden plot and knelt by it. "Mama," she whispered, "we can't leave. The plants will die without us." Clara joined her daughter, seeing the tiny green shoots Luke had planted. They were growing. Running again meant teaching Lily that dignity required constant retreat, that home was impossible, that love was always temporary. Clara made a decision. "We're staying." Luke returned at dawn. Clara was waiting for him on the porch. Lily was asleep inside. They looked at each other, both wearing the same exhausted resolve. "I'm sorry." They started simultaneously. Luke spoke first. "I proposed wrong, like you were a problem to solve, instead of." His voice broke. "Marry me, Clara. Not for them, not for the land. Because I love you. Because I'm tired of being afraid. Because you and Lily, you're my second chance. If you'll have me." Tears streamed down Clara's face. "I love you too, you stubborn fool." "Yes, but Luke, they'll fight harder." "Let them." He took her hands. "We're not alone anymore. Families stand together." Lily appeared in the doorway, saw them, and cheered. The decision was made. Luke had one more card to play. He rode to the county seat, found the address he'd carried for 5 years. Morrison's widow. She opened the door, recognized him immediately. "Luke Harrison. Thought you were dead." "Close enough, ma'am, but I need your help." She listened, her face grim, then disappeared into her house. She returned with a document. A legitimate deed transfer to the Morrison land, dated 6 months before her son's death. Luke's name, honoring the life debt. "Thomas wanted you to have it," she said, pressing the paper into his hands. "Said you save his life at Shiloh. Make something good there. My boy would have wanted that." Luke rode back to Aspen Falls with legal truth in his saddlebag. That Sunday morning, they walked into the church. Clara, Luke, and Lily holding both their hands. The congregation buzzed like disturbed hornets. Pastor Davies began his sermon, targeting them directly with barely veiled condemnation about sin and corruption. Mid-sermon, the bartender stood up, then the school teacher, the blacksmith's wife, a dozen others, quiet dissenters, tired of judgment disguised as righteousness. "Pastor," the bartender said clearly, with respect, "is this who we are? Folks who turn away children? Who punish a woman for being abandoned? Who threaten a man for showing kindness?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the pews. Blackwood erupted. "This is about law. Harrison's got no claim." Luke stood calmly. "Produce the deed." "I do now." Legal and witnessed. "Morrison left it to me for saving his life in the war." He looked at Blackwood without blinking. "You want this land? You'll have to kill me for it. And anyone who stands with me." His hand didn't touch his gun. It didn't need to. Others stood beside Luke. The sheriff, emboldened by the paper and the crowd, made his choice. "Deeds legitimate, Blackwood. Your claims dismissed. You threaten this family again, I'll arrest you." Blackwood stormed out defeated. The pastor stammered, having lost control. As people filed out, they didn't embrace Clara, but several nodded respectfully. It wasn't acceptance, but it was the beginning of something better. 6 weeks later, mid-May, the cabin had transformed. Curtains billowed in the warm breeze. Lily's drawings covered one wall. Tools were organized. The rocking chair sat on the porch like it had always been there. A traveling preacher arrived at Clara's request. They stood in the small cabin, Lily between them. The preacher spoke simple words about commitment and family and choosing each other daily. Luke placed a ring he'd forged himself from a horseshoe nail on Clara's finger. Rough work, but made with his hands. Clara Harrison. She had a name again. By choice this time. Lily scattered wildflowers she'd picked, declaring it decoration. They ate rabbit stew with vegetables from Luke's garden, their first meal as a legally recognized family. That evening, they sat on the porch in the comfortable silence that meant home. Lily played with her doll at their feet. Lily pointed suddenly. "Look, Papa!" More geese coming back. She called him Papa, naturally now, the title earned through daily presence. Luke smiled. "Everything comes back, little one, given the right home." Clara understood the double meaning. He was talking about himself, about her, about all broken things that heal when given safety. She leaned into his shoulder. He wrapped his arm around her. Lily climbed into Clara's lap. The sun set behind the distant mountains, painting everything gold. The garden thrived. Chickens pecked in the yard. Smoke rose from their chimney. The signal of life continuing. They had names. They had land. They had each other. Clara looked at Luke, then at their daughter, then at the home they'd built from nothing but determination and love. "We made it. We did," Luke said quietly. "We really did." Lily, drowsy in her mother's arms, asked the question one more time, needing the reassurance children always need. "And we're staying forever, right?" Luke and Clara answered together, their voices blending like harmony. Forever. The land, once cold and empty, bloomed. Winter was over. Spring had come to stay. And 3 people who'd been lost found each other and called home. A reminder that family isn't always about blood. It's about the people who show up when you're in the storm and choose to stay. What part of Luke and Clara's journey resonated most with you? Was it the moment in the saloon or Clara's decision by the garden? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching. And until next time, remember that even in the harshest winter, spring is always waiting to return.